In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Hello, Sublation media viewers, Sublation magazine readers, book readers, commies, anarchists, and other riffraff. It is the Sublation magazine show. I am Douglas Lain.
And I'm Ashley Frawley.
I'm supposed to say, if you are enjoying these videos and these streams, then press the like button, the subscribe button, and any other button you can find. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about what's hit the news cycle, what hit it last week, because I guess it was a slow week, the cancellation of Scott Adams. But this is all done in service to our month-long investigation and defense of the, I'm going to say the bourgeois subject, the humanist subject, the revolutionary subject of human reason and power. But Ashley, you just had an essay come out in Sublation magazine. You are the author as well as the host this week. So
I am, yeah.
Tell me about the article you wrote.
So I actually wrote that article, parts of it, in 2020, I believe, a few years back. And then I never placed it anywhere. I never finished it. And then the whole Scott, and I sort of like, it's always in the back of my mind, this idea of cancel culture as this kind of like medieval throwback and what that all means. And then the whole Scott Adams thing happened. And I thought, oh, it's been a while since there was an old style cancellation. Now maybe it's time to reflect. And so I went back and I decided to have a go at updating and updating that article and put it out in Sublation magazine. So yeah, the thesis of it is that, two things. Cancel culture is a kind of public ritual. And so we can kind of look at it as like, well, what is the function of this public ritual of punishment? Because it has a lot of similarities to studies of public rituals of punishment, for instance, and I draw a lot on Foucault. And the other point that I make is that, public rituals of punishment are also very carnivalesque. And so it's like this sort of carnivalesque liminal period. So if you want to go and have a look at that article, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. But wait, where is it now? I was going to throw it up.
I didn't put the link to it in the description, but when this stream is over, I'll put a link to it in the description. There it is. Do we want to put it in the chat?
Sure. So there it is. So there's a beautiful artwork there.
Try to read it while we're talking and see how that works out for them. Multitasking is the thing.
So the idea is that just as in sort of pre-modern times, punishment underscored the power of the sovereign, who had the power to not give life, or take away life, or give it, like to call off the spectacle at the last moment. It sort of underscored the power of the king. It underscored the laws of the king. And those who followed those laws, and implicitly warned people, of course, don't do what this person did. You should also be a law-abiding person. And in the same way, law being capitalist to fire workers implicitly underscores the power of capital. And it's the world turned upside down. The powerless act as though they have power. You get to join in this spectacle. Well, now you are the one with the power to take a life. And under capitalism, since we have to work in order to live, you are taking someone's livelihood at least. And so you get to be king for a day. You get to be capitalist for a day. And I warned that we shouldn't really take part in this, because at the end of the day, all we're doing is underscoring the power of capital against each other. And that's what we're doing. We're like pointing fingers at each other and saying, no, you fired this person. And then the right comes on, no, you fired lefty academics. And at the end of the day, who wins? Capital. Who at the end, their power is underscored each and every time you empower them to underwrite the conflict. And also the other point that I make is that Foucault points out that during the times when death was a spectacle, death lurked everywhere in this pre-modern world, right? Like death seemed to be senseless and lurked behind every corner. It was an ever-present fear and threat. And in the same way, like now we live into our 80s and we don't fear death as much, but a job loss is an ever-present fear and threat. And using death as a punishment, Foucault says, gave death meaning, gave this sort of senseless precarity to life a sense of meaningfulness. And in the same way, job loss, like we're imputing job losses with meaning. We're saying, oh, it's so senseless, but now we can use this. We can make it meaningful. We can use it to underscore our values, that sort of thing. And it gives us a sense of, gives this meaninglessness, this precarity, a sense of meaningfulness and justice.
Well, I want to try to play devil's advocate here, although I agree with you for the most part. But you know, I think the common response on the left side of the spectrum in the United States, meaning, like I saw this on Breaking Points, and so anything to the left of the Democratic Party, or the left side of the Democratic Party, would be that culture always sets up taboos and always creates limits on what is acceptable, and that the reaction to particularly Scott Adams' statements is sensible, given how offensive and beyond the pale those comments were. And one thing I want to do is talk about what Scott Adams said and the context in which he said it. Not because I think the context excuses it per se or justifies it, certainly doesn't justify it, but because it should be thought through. I think people are missing some of the story there. But before we do that, what would you say to people who say, look, we always set taboos in our culture. This isn't a matter of returning to some medieval standard, but it's just the way communities work. You have to set up the limits to what is acceptable speech if we're going to have a civilized society.
Yeah, I think this is a bad faith argument. People say this because they agree. They know very well that a publisher caving to pressure is, a publisher, dropping somebody is caving to pressure to maintain their brand. And in fact, the people who are lobbying publishers and workers and so on to fire somebody or drop somebody are using branding precisely to pressure. And the point is not simply to allow someone to maintain a brand, but to threaten someone's brand in order to punish an author. And so people are doing this, and as soon as it happens to the left, everyone starts freaking out. Oh my God. Well, no, and no one goes, well, it's just the right of the publication to decide, and it's just the right of the university to decide what gets taught. No. So I'll use another example that probably doesn't fit very well, but it popped into my mind. At the moment, Russia is attempting to remove Ukrainian identity from Ukrainian institutions. Now, you might say, this is totally illegitimate because Russia has no legitimate claim. But you have to wonder, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Because they're trying to launch an assault on those people through their institutions. And so when we attempt to do that, to launch an assault on some aggressor, some ideology we don't like, well, that's just fine. That's what the institution has the right to do that. The school has the right to do that, to decide what will be taught. As long as it's something like British identity or something like that. But when Russia's trying to remove that, they're going, oh no, this is wrong, this is illegitimate. Is the problem illegitimacy, or is the problem that you are trying to affect a change in the culture, not by appealing to people's hearts and minds, because you feel you cannot do that, you've already lost, but by going into institutions, cultural forms, and so on, to change things, to stipulate what can be said, what cannot be said. So it's easy when you already agree with what people are saying to kind of go, oh, well, it's just people adopting an editorial stance. Recently, a university banned a trans student from protesting, and everybody was kind of freaking out about that. But you want to ban, Christian groups from protesting, suddenly it's not a problem. So I think these are bad faith arguments. People know exactly what's going on. They know exactly why they're doing the lobbying. They want people to shut up. They want these ideas to be gone from the public sphere. And they're right. I don't like these ideas either, right? But you're not going to get rid of them by trying to push them out, because what you do is the same thing when you publicly humiliate people, when you publicly punish people, just like in medieval times, you create heroes out of petty thieves. You create spaces in which people claim, I am saying the unsayable, I am standing up for things. You draw attention so that someone like Milo Yiannopoulos all those years ago can go from complete obscurity and terrible ideas to a superstar. It doesn't, you're not doing anything about these things. And also, I think what really matters is what's being revealed underneath all of this is a very, very dire and weak view of humans, of subjectivity, of the listener. Because you think people are just going to watch this or hear these words and be like, oh, suddenly I'm feeling a little bit racist. Oh, I'm feeling a little bit violent. Well, no, you don't. You don't. You're capable of reflecting. What makes you so fucking special? Right? You are capable of reflecting and so on, but you don't give that same belief, that same faith to the masses. No, they're just a bunch of idiots. Only me. And then, of course, the masses respond by saying, well, I'm not an idiot. They know exactly what you think about them. Yeah, so I think it's based on this sort of belief in a fundamentally sort of degraded human subject. That, another example that I use in the article is Caroline Flack, that people were saying, oh, she needs to be made an example of, oh, you shouldn't have her as the head of a show when she's done this terrible thing. Like, she needs, what? I'm a fucking child. I need a role model on TV. Oh my God, it's Caroline Flack. Did you know that she was accused of assaulting her partner? Oh, I'm feeling a little bit punchy now. Oh my God. Well, it's on TV, so it must be okay. No, of course not. That's not how it goes. But it's like this extremely childish view, which I think is also really bad faith, because people know. They know that that's not how people react. It's just a very childish kind of way of justifying, blotting out from public life ideas that you don't like. And I think at the end of the day, what it is really about is a value conflict, a desire when everything else appears to be settled. Who gets what, how society should be ordered, all those questions are gone. They're not really debated. Nobody really believes that in the near future, we're going to organize society fundamentally differently than we do today. So where are the fights now? The fights are, well, I might be losing my power. I might not be able to say how things are organized, but I can at least get you to shut up. I can at least make you affirm my values and make you stand on a public stage and apologize for what you did, or get the fuck out of polite society, because I demand. I've been swearing a lot, and we just started the stream. I'm going to get
demonetized. We're not going to get demonetized. You're fine. Or if we do, it's not the end of the world. We're not even receiving our YouTube ad revenue at the moment because of some glitch, so it doesn't matter. But anyhow, it's so little. But all right. But let me intervene here and ask this, or try to speak to this. I think that when you point out that people are acting in a hypocritical way, or that what people are really trying to accomplish is simply to get their cultural values to be accepted and block the cultural values of their opponents, what is missing from that explanation is, I think, something that for you is in the background, a kind of a background assumption, namely that in a democratic society, in a free and democratic society, speech has to be free, and the penalties associated with saying something offensive have to be relegated to the private realm, or to civil society, rather than be enforced either by centralized monopolistic forms of power and capital or by the state. So also the penalties, like for instance, if someone says something to me at a party that I find really offensive, I can decide not to be friendly with that person again, not to invite them to any more parties, right? But if I try to get them fired from their job, then I think actually going beyond what is legally permissible. It'd be kind of a form of harassment, and and it would be very hostile, an extremely hostile thing to do. So, my own private choice not to associate with someone who said something offensive to me at a party, that's fine. But when I go into trying to the realm of trying to actually penalize people and change the outcome and trajectory of their life because of something they said to me at a party, then I'm being extremely authoritarian
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that can't be justified. And I think that holds for groups of people as well. Like we while we don't have to read Dilbert and we don't have to watch Scott Adams online, and I find him to be, when I've seen him, to be smug and patronizing and not very entertaining. Ultimately, I mean, that's entertaining at first, maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you just sort of see, oh, I see his shtick, I see how he's going. So I cannot watch Scott Adams. I don't think Dilbert's been funny for many years, but to say this guy, because he said something offensive that I interpreted as very offensive, should no longer be allowed to draw cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
That's very draconian and authoritarian and well beyond the pale. And I'm going to give an example of why I take that position. And then just when I first realized that this was my position in the 90s, there was a comic strip artist who created a comic called Boiled Angel. And I don't remember his name, but the Boiled Angel depicted all sorts of really of atrocities, of devils sodomizing infants, of all sorts of blood and guts, and drawn in a very juvenile way, in an underground comic that nobody really read. But in Florida, where he lived, this was considered obscene, and he was brought to trial. And one of my creative writing professors from Equity College actually was a witness in that trial for the prosecution, and determined that it was not art, and that he not only should all those comics be banned, but he should no longer be allowed to draw a comic, even in the privacy of his own home. So, and I realized that at that moment that my former professor was just not to be trusted. That he had put himself in the position of arbiter of what art is and what would be acceptable for society, and had turned his back to the notion that speech is something that develops and that art is something that has to be judged privately. And so I absolutely oppose the cancellation of cartoonists or anyone based on the offensiveness of what they've said. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, oh, it's unjustifiable. Like people will justify. They come up with all kinds of justifications. 5 minutes ago, you were an anti-capitalist. Now suddenly Big Daddy Capital is just within his right. Like people will make up all sorts of things, but it's bad faith. And what it is that people get to be powerful for a day. They get to, it's the world turned upside down. I'm powerless in every area of my life, but I'm going to make you pay. I'm going to have the power. My boss holds this axe over my head all the time. I live at the edge of existence. I'm going to make you feel like that. That's how I'm going to show you. And I'm going to tell you something really bad and really, really embarrassing. But this is kind of my thing that I do. I do the odd autoethnography to kind of understand how some of this stuff works. So I had a bit of an online altercation with this SOB who really pissed me off. Oh my God. And I think he was trying to piss me off, you know, like trolls, that's what they do. He was just arguing in such horrific bad faith. And I started trying to be nice to him. And he quote tweeted every single response and like mocked me with horrible misunderstandings. Just, I couldn't believe the amount of confidence that this person had in their complete misreadings and misunderstandings, while they called me stupid. And, well, do you see these people, supposedly lecturers, universities, claiming that Marx wasn't an anti-consumerist? Ha ha ha! Now this is what you're paying for, and you know, really. And I was pissed. I was so mad, and I got drawn in. Like, I should not have done this. No, I made a rule now. I don't argue with teenagers on the internet.
Yeah, that's a good rule.
But the thing is, at first you don't
unless they're your own teenagers, unless they're your kids.
At first I didn't realize, and then I was like, oh no, this is either like a really angsty teenager, or I'm pretty sure it's an American grad student, because grad students can be like this as well. Really fucking annoying. Sorry, I'm saying this from a place of love. I used to be one of these people, and I look back at how awful I was, and I cringe so bad. I told the story about how I didn't give a standing ovation to Noam Chomsky. Like, who the fuck did I think I was? I'm like fucking 22-year-old nobody. Anyway, so I totally understand. You're young, you know this, you're just learning things and you're super confident or whatever. But this person was being awful. And I knew it was a grad student. And he starts claiming, oh, I'm an old guy, been in academia for a long time. And I was like, no fucking chance. No chance anybody with this attitude and this overconfidence is in academia at all. Guaranteed this is a master's student. For sure, but not even PhD, because PhD will knock some sense into you. Anyways, so I realized I want to hurt him. I want to make him pay for this. And I felt that. And it was the first time that I felt that. Especially toward a young person, because usually, because somebody I knew that was young, I could tell. Usually I'm like, oh, you know, they're learning or whatever. And I might say something snarky, but I'll leave it at that. Oh, I wanted to hurt him. And so I felt this, and I was so disgusted with myself, but I went with it. And I was feeling like, okay, what would I do in this situation? And I went through his posts, and I could see, yes, this is a young grad student. You know, he's lying to me saying he's an old guy, but he clearly posted, I'm doing my master's. Oh, I just turned 31. Like, clearly. Anyway, and I thought to myself, you know, if I was like in a position, or if I knew somebody at that university, I could probably like do something. And I realized, I was like, where's that feeling coming from? It's that I wanted to make him pay. It made me so mad. I wanted to make him pay. And I get that same kind of, obviously I didn't do anything. I just went with it and I blocked him. But yeah, and it's that same kind of feeling that I get, this super angry, uncontrollable anger that I feel when somebody says something about Native people, pisses me off. Like, I can't, it's like visceral. And what's the other thing that really bothers me? Oh yeah, scientific racism. When I see that stuff come up, I'm like, oh my God, are we doing this again? And it makes me mad. And then I have to stop myself and kind of think like, we got to fight this. I don't want to have to fight this battle again, but I'm going to have to fight this battle again. And so it's like, it's this desire to have power, because I am powerless, and I was powerless, especially in that Twitter exchange, to do anything about it. And that's what bothered me too, is that he kept quote tweeting. And so we couldn't even have a thread, we have a back and forth where I could convince him. There was no convincing, right? And I think when that part of the equation is gone, you feel that there's no point in convincing. It's like, I just want to crush you. That's what I want to happen right now. And I feel like that's where we are as a culture, where there's just no convincing, or we believe that there's no convincing. And the desire then is just to crush. I'm sorry for the very long anecdote, but that's
not, you know, and in a bit, I have this, I created a, yeah, that's a good idea. But I have this short montage, kind of mini critical cuts video that I put together after reading the beginning of the Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, to try to summarize it. But what I'll say right now, so I might show that in a bit. I will show that in a bit, either on this stream or in the Parrot Room. But what I want to say now is just that Adorno and Horkheimer believe that reason and discourse and debate had devolved into pure power politics. And that's something that we can address in a bit. But can we talk about what Scott Adams actually said for a bit? I know this is a terrain where we risk getting canceled, but there are two sides to what he said, right? What Rasmussen put out a poll asking people if they thought the phrase "it's okay to be white" was acceptable or not, whether that was true or not, I guess. And that's it goes back a few years. It came out of 4chan as a way to own the libs or expose the NPCs or what have you, because it was designed to provoke a reaction from leftists and liberals, but seem innocuous to normies, right? So it's okay to be white. And most people, no matter who they were, white, black, or some other ethnicity, said it. Yeah, they thought it was okay to be white. The reason why people, like say on the left, might react against the phrase "it's okay to be white" is because they've been taught, and it's true, that whiteness as a category arose through white supremacy, through the domination of people of color in the Western world, and specifically in America, as a justification for slavery, segregation, and other forms of oppression. So whiteness itself isn't really an ethnicity. It encompasses a variety of ethnicities, and it's historically constructed. And so to be white, as opposed to being French or being, Italian or English or Spanish or what have you, or some other European ethnicity, is to participate in white supremacy. That's the left theory, right? So, but the normie reaction to that is just, it's been being white. The category of whiteness has been around for a long time. People don't necessarily, in America especially, even know what their ethnic origin really is. They just can look at the color of their skin and know where they fall. And so to hear it's not okay to be white is just to hear that you are not okay based on the color of your skin from a normie perspective. So it's in that context that Scott Adams would say that the 27% of Black respondents to the Rasmussen poll were hateful because he saw them as being racist against what isn't, the innocent category of whiteness. And when you understand the context of whiteness and and you think through the likelihood, how likely it would be that Black respondents would know how whiteness is constructed, know that whiteness itself is connected to white supremacy. It's not hateful for them to turn against the "okay to be white" phrase. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as my position on what he actually said. But
so what you're saying is that he's innocent.
Who? Scott Adams?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's being well, obviously he's not innocent, because anytime there's 27% of the population who says something, you should take into account that, they may have a reason for saying it that you're not understanding. And you can't just label 27% of the population as a hate group. That's insane. And also he's smart enough to at least have an inkling of why "it's okay to be white" has a different cadence, different meaning than, "it's okay to be Black, it's okay to be Asian, it's okay to be Indian." But, it just has a different connotation. And he knows that. So he's not innocent. He's playing games. But nonetheless, that's the context of the whole debacle.
The thing is, like, people get canceled for much less, right? So it's less about, like, that's why I wrote in that article.
Did it sound like I was saying he was innocent when I explained?
I was accusing you. No, I wrote at the bottom of that article, like, we can examine these things without defending people, what they're saying. Like, that should go completely without saying. But these days, it doesn't, because you're this and that adjacent, because everybody's lost their fucking minds. So I actually had to say, I am not defending what anybody has said in the same way that I'm not defending what anybody on the scaffold would have done. You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't ever deserve to like be charged or whatever it might be, you know, or they were like, you know, not every victim has to be 100% blameless. This really weird, especially American culture, has this really weird melodramatic portrayal of things where it's just black and white. So, like, victims have to be wholly innocent and perfectly angelic. And then if they did anything wrong, it's like, well, you know, maybe, you know, even if you did something wrong, the punishment is not like, be like, well, what was she wearing? Right? No, you can wear something and the punishment is not something bad happening to you. Like, they have this completely, so it's like, if there's any like tarnish on the victim, oh, that's it. Anyways, so it's victims.
No, I agree, but
perfect and innocent, or else they deserve no sympathy.
The comedian, the guy who played Kramer, I think it's Michael Richards is his name. You know, what he did was much more direct.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He was on stage, just started calling the guy who was heckling him the N-word. What Scott Adams did was a little subtler than that, and it wasn't really, it was meant to be political. It was meant to kind of, it was another attempt, a really badly executed attempt to own the libs. It was playing along with this it's okay to be white meme that had come out before. And Rasmussen, you know, was also playing that game a bit. But anyhow, I just think it's worth noting what it was. I'm not saying that what it was matters in terms of, like, I didn't like Boiled Angel. I thought it was, you know, very bad comic, and I thought the guy who drew it was disturbed. But nonetheless, I didn't think the state should take away, or anyone should take his right to draw those comics.
So somebody wrote in the comments up above, no worker is in danger of cancellation. And I wonder if that person really believes that. I'm trying to find the comment, but I've lost it now. There are lots of examples of just regular people getting canceled. Like, does anybody remember the story of Emmanuel Cafferty? The guy who was just driving with his hand out the window, who got fired because he was making a white supremacist hand sign when he was literally just driving with his hand out the window, and he himself was Mexican. Like, that's the kind of shit that happens. Like, people, it's like, oh, I feel, and like the person who did it, who like hunted that person down and got them fired, you can just imagine, like, they feel this like powerlessness. It's right in the middle of Black Lives Matter and so on. It's like, well, this is something that I can do. This is direct action. You know, I'll just fuck up this person's life. There we go. I've done something in the world. You know, this does affect regular people. It doesn't happen on a public stage because they can't benefit from it. But like, intentionally getting canceled, this is the thing that I don't understand. Why people think like this performative outrage, and it is performative, by the way, because, hold on, I'm making a note here, seeking, so I don't forget what I'm saying, because I'm kind of cold and I'm all like living on this stuff here. A little out of it. Anyway, like, it is performative outrage because, like, there's a humongous mismatch between the supposed horror and terrible and violence that you have enacted upon me. These words are violence, you know, and the fucking like memification of the whole thing. Like, if you really thought violence and it's the Nazis or like whatever, this person's like literally a Nazi. Okay, I'm going over the top now. But like, you wouldn't be memeing it, you know? You're like, everybody's laughing and joking around and everybody's just enjoying the spectacle. There's this humongous mismatch. And that famous example of the woman who said, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, LOL, just kidding, I'm white. There was absolute glee at pursuing this woman. Oh boy, when's she gonna land? You know, you really fucking thought she was like the worst person in the world. Why? What's this joy? What's this enjoyment that you're getting? So it's very much performative. And the thing that I don't understand is that, yes, it'll destroy people like that, right?
It did really a lot of damage to that woman's
of course,
life.
Absolutely. But then you have these people who deliberately seek out cancellation. Like Andrew Tate, for example, specifically said, like the strategy was specifically to say things to piss off libs online, so they would put him on blast. And that is how he got so popular. And then people have no sense that particularly for those people, your performative outrage is literally their, not literally, but is very much their lifeblood. It is what is feeding them. It is putting food on their table. You are investing in their brand when you get angry. So I don't know. I don't know why people have not caught on to that. And I thought that they had. You know, people were like, oh, don't give these people oxygen or whatever. Don't don't try to get them canceled. Don't try to like get them booted off things, because it just raises their profile more and more and more. People don't. And then I thought, we were learning. And then you had the whole Dilbert thing. It was like, again, the spectacle of the performative outrage.
Well, we should talk a little bit about brands and branding and the way ideas and the commentators and writers and philosophers who espouse them are transformed into brands, and what that means, because it's something that we run up against, I think. And what I would say right now in the political side of the branded world is that the first thing you decide when you're branded as a political thinker or as a political publisher is which side of the culture war you're on. And that often boils down to whether you're on the left or on the right. But you can be on. Some people are attempting to be on the opposite side of the culture war, the anti-woke side. I mean, that maybe I'm describing myself to and still be on the left. I really try not to define what we're doing politically in those terms as being, like saying, oh yeah, being anti-woke is what guides my politics. Or my political thinking. I don't want to end up there because it's too impoverished. Even I think Zizek's last article ultimately did not get very far or develop very much because of the way in which he deployed the idea of wokeness. Even if it's a real thing in the world, it just isn't it just isn't where the battle is really being waged. But anyhow, I feel as though we're pushed around by brands. You have to develop a brand, but it is a way of constraining your own thinking and making sure that you don't and making sure that you find an audience who already thinks the way you do, rather than trying to find an audience that is interested in thinking with you, I recently watched Trigonometry, which is definitely that on that anti-woke side of the branding. I think that I would fairly say that's a conservative podcast, although, maybe center left conservative. But it was a woman who wrote from Unheard, who'd written a book about progress and feminism and had taken a stance against feminism. And her prescription in the end was we should ban contraception, not necessarily legally, but through some sort of cultural change, right? And I thought her prescription was terrible, it didn't offend me. But I just thought it was misguided and simple-minded and authoritarian. But the listening to her argue her case was really helpful to me. Like, it was enlightening to hear her explanation of the history of contraception, the history of the feminist struggle, the changes from an agrarian society, the changes that occurred in the domestic realm. All of this was worth thinking about and hearing. And if you block off the part of the conversation which is not only able to, but kind of compelled to make those kinds of arguments, and you end up not understanding the world. You end up blocking off aspects of reality that you should take in and try to comprehend. So that's another reason why we don't, that censoring and canceling people is bad news. One is that it sets up a split between the left side of capital and the right side of capital, that doesn't allow for something independent of capital altogether to develop, even in thought, and also because it just impoverishes your own understanding and your own thinking to approach the world that way.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I'm like, I always say this, but I really recommend you specifically seek out and try to follow and cultivate your stupid online universes that we all dwell in, to include ideas that you really can't stand. And it's annoying. And then I wind up liking posts sometimes because I forget why I followed somebody. And then I'm like, I hate them like 80% of the time, and then they say something funny, and I'm like, tee. We wind up being chums. Anyway, no, I find myself sometimes I have to be very careful that I'm listening to something and I'm enjoying something because I agree, and I feel myself being taken down that easy path. And I have to stop and be like, no, this is sugar. It's bad for you. Go and eat something good for you. Go and deal with things that you don't like. And I try to do that all the time. Like I find myself, and also like I agree with a lot of things that are, and this is the thing too that's really difficult about branding and so on, and how we're kind of like forced into these worlds where it's like, oh, this is my brand, and these are the ideas that are for my brand, is that you wind up being afraid to say things or to think about things in ways that would piss off your audience. Mm-hmm. And that is absolute poison. That is absolute poison. Mm-hmm. And I have to really think like, oh man, I'm going to get shit for thinking this or saying this. And I have to say, well, look, is it right? Is it correct? And if so, I have to defend it. And mm-hmm. There's lots of things where I know that oh God. So I'm going to go on GB News tomorrow on mm-hmm. Dubes and Co. And the boats thing is in the news. Mm-hmm. And I know that on GB News, my brand is like pro-freedom and all of that stuff. And mm-hmm. now I have to go and stick to my guns because you can never, ever, ever make me say something I don't believe in. I will never say things that I don't believe in just to make people happy. But I also have to convince this particular audience, and I have to do it in a way that is not me, oh, look how good I am. Look how much I care about refugees on boats. No, I care. I do. I care a lot about this issue. It is fucking inhumane. And it's the government's fault that we have this problem. They've cut off safe routes and they're making it even harder, which is just going down the same damn path that led to this situation. How many people need to die before you realize it's your goddamn fault? Anyways, this really, really matters. So it's not my chance to stand on a soapbox and, all right, everybody, look at me. I'm a good person. I got to convince people, I have an opportunity there. And I know that it's going to make people angry. So it's going to take a lot of care. I have to sit there and really think about how can I possibly, and it's not like the weight of the world's on my shoulders and I'm going to make a big, big impact or whatever, but I do have the chance. I do have an opportunity and I have lots of people listening to me. And so I'm going to take care to do that. And I just feel like what winds up happening is if you don't have the courage or even just the time, and you're maintaining a brand, the temptation might be just to think like, oh, how will I avoid flack? How can I avoid flack? And this is how a lot of media works. In fact, Chomsky talks about this, that when something makes its way onto television, it goes through all of these filters, one of which is flack. You go up and you say something and you get a ton of flack, you never say that again. And you have to find ways to be creative to get around that. And I have found ways to be creative and to get Marxism on TV. But you got to be careful, and I can understand that the temptation would be to take the path of least resistance, or to say, I'm not going to share a platform with those people, which I think is the most horrible thing that people do is this whole no platforming thing. Like it just, for me, it tells me you don't really care about the issues you claim to care about because you worry that it's going to affect your brand by being next to somebody else. If you care about your issue, you're going to say it to anybody. You're going to work hard to convince anybody if that's something that you really care about. And this thing where it's people like, oh no, I'm not going to talk about that because so-and-so is going to be on the same platform with me. Well, then you don't really care. You don't really care about your issue. You care about your brand. You care about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I want to say a couple of things in response to that to address that last point you made. When it comes to politics, when it comes to actual like electoral politics, the move to no platform or to, like, let's say when they criticized Bernie Sanders for going on Joe Rogan, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reasoning behind that criticism seemed counterproductive and self-destructive to the Democratic Party's cause. Like, of course, you would want to reach out to Rogan's audience and bring them into the Democratic Party. That gives you more voters and gives you more opportunities to win. On the other hand, the way politics works right now is that you have set blocks of voters that you can rely upon. And the game is get out the vote game to those blocks rather than seeking new voters and new demographics that, then that if they do come in and become a block, you'll have to accommodate. They might shape your platform going forward. They may make demands upon you. So, what they were saying to Sanders is, no, do not court this particular working class middle America voting block. We don't need them. We can win without that. And you're threatening the status quo within the party when you bring in these new people. So, but what that means is that you're always, people who play the game that way are playing the game to maintain the game as it is. They're playing the game for the establishment. There's a conservative approach to a profoundly conservative approach to politics. That's the first thing I'll say. And then there was and now I've forgotten the other things I wanted to say. So I guess it
I do try to right.
Yeah, I should take notes while you talk.
Sorry, go ahead. Do you remember?
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, somebody here is accusing me of white supremacy, of course. Isn't white supremacy the real cancel culture? Look at the number of black men arrested each year. These men are literally being taken out and shoved in cages. So spare me your tears over this racist. Oh, I'm so sorry, because I didn't realize that cancel culture is doing something about that. One more person canceled means one less black person in jail. Come on, guys, we're almost there. No, it doesn't do anything about that. It doesn't do anything about that, but it does make you feel better about your inability to do anything about that, doesn't it? Doesn't it? You feel like you're part of that, don't you? You're not doing anything. In fact, you're making it worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not as though Scott Adams is I suppose if you thought the Democratic Party was going to do something about that, and you think Scott Adams is helping the Republicans, then you can argue that that canceling Scott Adams will help keep black people out of prison. But the facts don't support your argument. The Democratic Party, it was the Clintons and Biden who created the policies that incarcerated so many millions of black people in America. And that approach to policing and dealing with the crisis that is our society today is not going away if we keep electing these technocrats. So we're going to have to try to develop a new approach to politics rather than side with, the Trumpists or the Bidenists if we're going to try to solve these problems. And that means opening up independent realm for speech so people can think together and work together and talk together outside of these branded left-right side of capital. Not, I'm a leftist, but I don't think that the left side of capital defines the left. We have to break free from this lesser evil approach and this cage we're in and within our own thinking. I spent a lot of time making this montage. Can we see if we can segue into talking about this critique of Enlightenment reason that Adorno and Horkheimer put forward? Because on a philosophical level, our position of championing human reason and freedom has some rather intense critics, and even on the left, especially on the left, that I think we have to take up and address and understand in order to first before we can address what they're saying. So I created this short, and I thought maybe I'd play it now or towards the end of this, and then we can discuss it a bit now, and then for the patrons. Phil Cheslett criticized me recently with saying, if you want to know the truth, Sublation Media viewers, come pay us $5 a month. Otherwise, the secrets will be withheld and the revolution will never come.
Look, man, Doug has to eat, all right? Like,
right. But look, the other thing is, everything we talk about in the Parrot Room will also be expressed in future streams like this one, and podcast interviews, and in Critical Cuts videos, which will be made available to the public. My thinking doesn't stop when I start working on things that I know are going to be public facing. So yeah, let me see if I can I go ahead and throw that up? Should I put that up there?
Yeah,
the montage? Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to do it. Here we go. In 1985, Marvel Comics released a limited series that consisted of 9 independent comics, but that crossed over into 22 other comic books. Secret Wars 2 was a marketing gimmick that required readers to purchase multiple titles if they were to follow along with the whole story, and it was tremendously successful commercially, even though all 31 comics were critically panned. The plot of the series involved a godlike character named the Beyonder, who was so powerful that he could shape reality to his whim. If he wanted to, he could create a whole world made of Rubik's Cubes with the snap of his finger, or he could turn Captain America into a girl, or he could destroy everything in the universe and then create the whole universe again. One of the questions or problems that the Secret Wars series, both the first series and the second, tackled was the problem of power. Secret Wars was about how to understand and cope with unlimited power. In 1947, the Frankfurt School philosophers Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno tackled this same problem in their book, Dialectic of the Enlightenment. And in the first chapter, they quoted Francis Bacon, who, writing in the 17th century, laid out the premise of Secret Wars. Bacon wrote polemics against tradition, against superstition. In the Dialectic of Enlightenment, his project is summarized this way. Enlightenment's program was the disenchantment of the world. It wanted to dispel myths, to overthrow fantasy with knowledge. Bacon, the father of experimental philosophy, despised the exponents of tradition who substituted belief for knowledge and were as unwilling to doubt as they were reckless in supplying answers. All this, he said, stood in the way of the happy match between the mind of man and the nature of things. Let's repeat that last bit. The happy match between the mind of man and the nature of things. In the first Secret Wars comic book series, a character named Dr. Doom managed to create that happy match. Doom, using some mirrors and glass lenses at an opportune moment, managed to capture the power of the Beyonder and use it for himself. Doom became God. But once his mind matched up with reality, he discovered a new difficulty. His mind didn't match up with itself. When everything he thought became real, Doom was faced with one adversary, his own mind. In the Dialectics of Enlightenment, the logic behind this 80s comic book is made clearer. According to Horkheimer and Adorno, Enlightenment-era thinking was totalitarian. Like Dr. Doom in the comic book, it aimed to absorb everything and control everything, first by reducing all of reality to the level of mathematics, and then by reducing mathematical reality into a unity. The natural world was to be understood not through myths or concepts or necessary forms, but through a process of equalization. Adorno and Horkheimer wrote, "For the Enlightenment, everything which cannot be resolved into numbers and ultimately into one is an illusion. Modern positivism consigns it to poetry. Unity remains a watchword from Parmenides to Russell. All gods and qualities must be destroyed." Positivism is a theory of knowledge claiming that in order for us to know something, to take it into the realm of reason, what we know must either be tautological, a matter of definition within a system, or empirical, something that we find in the world. Moral, artistic, spiritual, and many other claims or forms of knowledge are reduced to the level of nonsense, myth, or mere fancy. According to Horkheimer and Adorno, the Enlightenment project necessarily reduced knowledge and meaning to power and survival. People are faced not with decisions based on principles, cultural values, or moral inclinations, but upon a choice between survival and doom. This, quote, choice is reflected even in the principle that of the two contradictory propositions, only one can be true and the other false. The formalism of this principle and the entire logic established around it stem from the opacity and entanglement of interests in a society in which the maintenance of forms and the preservation of individuals only fortuitously coincide. The aim of gaining power over nature necessarily leads to a contradiction, and humanity is alienated from itself as it is overwhelmed and then destroyed by the totalitarian power its own project has unleashed on the world.
Hear me, nations of the world. My power is without limit. I can turn day to blackest night, summer to winter. But I am above all a reasonable man. Thus I have granted your leaders 1 week to surrender to the rule of doom.
I muted us during that. What did you think of that, Ashley?
Wow, Doug, you really spent a lot of work on that. Well done. So here's something that might surprise people, and especially if you read any of my published work, my academic work. A lot of what I argue is very similar to what Adorno and Horkheimer argue. A lot of the people who question the one-to-one relationship between the mind of man and reality. I also question that. I am a critical realist. The work that I do is contextual constructionism. I do social constructionism. That is my area of research. So I'm not sitting here. This is the thing. Like, the answer that isn't to kind of go and react and reject. Oh no, all these people are crazy and they're anti-truth and blah blah blah. Ergo, race is real. This is what people are doing. I just wrote in the comments. Sorry, I just saw she's a charlatan and my heart stopped for a second. Who, me?
No, I don't think. They're talking about somebody else. She's a circus entertainer. Time and time again in her book, she says, "Be anti-racist."
Oh, okay.
Robin D'Angelo. It's D'Angelo.
Oh, it hurt. That hurt, man.
Yeah, it's a mean. But D'Angelo did bring that upon herself.
No. Okay. Anyways, so yeah, I've lost my train of thought there, but I think that's the wrong path to take. That it's completely wrong and extremely disturbing, actually, that in reacting against some of the insanity of people who went, and this all happened in the academy, by the way, like 15 years ago, we saw this exact same thing where people kind of went nuts and they were like, there is no truth, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of came out of that. Society is going right in and people have reacted. People are reacting and they're going all out on this scientism. And that's really bad. That's bad. The point is, look, science is the best thing that humans have come up with to try to get something like the mind of man match, as you know, using the words of Bacon, like the mind of man matching the world. But between our minds and the world is a whole universe of culture and history and language and so on. And we can't escape that as human beings. Zizek used to quote this author whose name I forgot, which was, man is an animal sick with language, and oh, how he longs for a cure. And I really believe that, you know, and Zizek used to have this whole riff where he'd talk about how we watch nature documentaries because we wish that we could be like animals, just acting directly on the world and not having to live in this world of mediation. But unfortunately, that's how we live our lives. We have a mediated existence. And this is why, no, I don't go like down that path where people, like a lot of what I'm saying might be superficially close to what the anti-woke people say or the right-wingers say, but I don't let them off the hook either. We've allowed them to lay claim to the legacy of liberalism or whatever, but they are not safe. It is not safe with them. As I say over and over and over again, the moment that it is expedient for them, they will drop all of that stuff, and they do. And I say that in the article as well, that cancel culture is a bipartisan affair, you know, and that they match their so-called claim on free speech with trying to cancel lefty academics, trying to stipulate what can be taught in schools. Everybody's playing this stupid game. Nobody really believes in the human subject. And this is also what Adorno and Horkheimer talk about, where the liberal Enlightenment sort of rational subject that, you know, the same ideas, the same reason that allowed man to dominate the world turns around and dominates ourselves. We become sort of destroyed by it. And this is what's happened. Ironically, like, what is the science that, what is it that destroys the subject? So-called science, as though it's like handed down from God that science says that humans don't have reason. Isn't that a funny thing to say? So yeah, these people, they're not really the guardians of it. They cut down human beings as well. They also don't believe in the ability of human beings to hear speech that they disagree with. So the issue that I have is that nobody believes in the human subject today. But I also don't think that the answer to that is to go stupidly down this path of science and reification and all of that stuff. No, we have to understand, like, there's no escape from social construction. Right? Like, this is the thing. It's like when social constructionism went out into the world, it came out as like a science.
You do, John. We're parodying you. We're paraphrasing you. And the fact that you object means that either we've totally misunderstood, or maybe you've got a problem. All right. So,
but anyways, so social constructionism is like people are like, oh, X is a social construct. But the thing that I like isn't. No, it too is a social construct. But you then have to make the argument about why this is preferable and how this will allow us to live together. And people are not making that extra step. They're not doing that. And we have to do that. And that's where reason comes in. We will decide. Yes, of course, all these things are social constructs. But as human beings, we must decide what construct we're going to live our lives by.
One of the things that I found in the Adorno book, in the Horkheimer Adorno's Dialectic of Enlightenment, was a defense, I thought, of nature, of the concept of nature, and they seem to be laying the problems of the world at the feet of what they called instrumental reason, but instrumental reason was reason in service of human need. Okay, so it wasn't instrumental only in so much as in the like the Hegelian sense, where it was instrumental because it was the instrument itself was all that it could be reached, or in a Kantian sense, where you have to understand that the instrument of your senses is the foundation for your understanding rather than some direct access to the world. It wasn't instrumental in that problematizing way where you end up stuck with a subjectivity. But it was instrumental also beyond that in so much as it in political and economic terms was set the task of serving the needs of humanity, serving the needs of the human. And they seem to be, as I read it, questioning that. And they also said some other things in that first chapter. For instance, that the realm of economics had been overcome, and that and they basically seem to be insinuating that power itself, direct human power, rather than power mediated by a system of relations, but rather direct power, human power, had come to dominate humanity. So these are things I want to look at more. I'm going to be writing another essay exploring this differently, not relying on a comic book I remember from when I was 14, but but on some other obscure 80s cultural reference. I'm sure I just haven't thought of which one yet. For
You're so good with the cultural references. I've been struggling for my next base day. I feel like, where's my jumping off point? Instead of just being like, hey, look, I'm this egghead and listen to all my smart ideas. I've been like, and all I can think about is that time I considered canceling some guy on Twitter. Like,
right. Yeah, and I turned to this old comic book to, rather than using the cultural references actually in the book, like the Odyssey. I'm like, fuck the Odyssey. What about Secret Wars? Anyway, let's close it out here with people who want to hear.
So we're going to talk
more
about what are all these problems with reason. Can we actually even reason our way out of this? Because a lot of people have been thinking about this. Adorno, Horkheimer, Foucault, Heidegger, and they're smart. Right. They're a lot smarter than us. So can we reason our way out of this?
I'll just be trying to cover what I read from the Dialectic of Enlightenment and not Heidegger and everybody else. But we'll see you in the parrot room. I'll be putting a link to it in the description for this live stream, and then around 10:30 we'll start up in the parrot room. So thanks for watching.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised